Hi everyone, welcome to the Whiteleyverse with me, Connor Whiteley, for another daily short story. Now, before I start today's story, please remember to like, comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content, and the engagement really helps the Whiteleyverse with the YouTube algorithm. Also, if you want to buy this short story and any of my other fiction, then they're available from all major ebook retailers and at your local bookstore and local library if you requested, and you can order paperback copies from Amazon. Now, here's today's short story. I hope you enjoyed just as much as I did writing it.
Love in the Condolence. Jack Willmore stood outside his best friend in the entire world's small university apartment. As he stood in the bright white corridor that shouted how modern and updated it was, he just smiled to himself as he waited for his best friend, Hannah, to finally come out. The corridor he was standing in was perfectly warm, not too cold, not too warm, and filled with the delightful hints of basil tomatoes and cooking pasta filtering through the air from a nearby kitchen. Jack just rested against the perfectly warm walls and stared at the thick blue carpet that was a little silly for a university corridor in his opinion. There were so many university students walking up and down it at all hours that it would only take one of them having muddy shoes to ruin it. But if the university really wanted to buy great-looking things over more practical things, then he was hardly going to argue with them. There were so many yellow wooden doors lining the corridor that Jack was really wondering how many students actually lived on this floor alone. He knew that Hannah shared her kitchen with 10 other students, and that certainly got interesting at dinner time for sure, but he had no idea about the other kitchens on the same floor. Whatever the answer, that was certainly one of the reasons why Jack absolutely loved living on campus. There were just so many great people to meet, get to know and become friends with that life really was amazing. In Jack's own apartment block that wasn't quite as nice as Hannah's, he had become great friends with a cute French boy that he seriously wished was gay but sadly wasn't, an amazing Italian girl, and they all tolerated a Portuguese boy. Jack looked back at Hannah's yellow door and really wanted her to hurry up so the queue to sign the Queen's Book of Condolence wouldn't get too long. He wasn't even much of a royalist, beyond what was apparently normal for a British man to be. Jack admitted that the royal family did a lot of important diplomatic work for the country. They were kind and did actually love their subjects. But Jack would never watch a royal event if it was on, and he didn't even pay much attention to the Jubilee a few months ago. It just didn't interest him. Jack listened to the rustling coming from behind Hannah's door and smiled at a very cute blonde man as he walked past with his good-looking girlfriend, as they looked what they were going to study in the library judging by the sheer amount of books they were carrying. Jack might have been a first year at Kent University, but he supposed he should be taking the first year on his psychology course seriously, but he just wanted to enjoy university, and it was only the first proper week of lectures anyway. Most of them were just boring introductory talks anyway. Being a part of this so-called historic moment seemed a lot more interesting, and Jack would only be going into Canterbury city centre to go shopping with Hannah later anyway. Apparently Hannah needed some more clothes for going out in the evening, and even though Jack didn't like shopping too much, he definitely wasn't that type of gay, he wanted to spend some more time with her because with her being on a different course to him, Jack was embarrassingly concerned about not seeing his childhood best friend as much as he used to. A few moments later, Hannah's bright yellow door opened and she walked out, and Jack felt very underdressed now. Hannah looked flat-out amazing with her long shoulder-length brown hair that was perfectly accented by her posh-ish black dress, leggings and high heels that really made her look important. Jack almost felt silly in his white hoodie, blue jeans and black trainers that were covered in mud from a wrong turn through the woods that he had taken with some other friends yesterday. That was definitely the last night Jack was going to go hiking with those friends without his phone again. "Ready to go," Hannah said, way too excitedly for this early in the morning. Jack didn't normally get up until about 9 o'clock in the morning, but because of his own interest, and Hannah's rather extreme interest in signing the Book of Condolence for the now-dead Queen, Jack had had to get up at the ungodly hour of 7 o'clock in the morning. There was only one person, Nick Locke, in existence that Jack knew of that would get up that early and actually function and look good, but that boy was long gone, and as much as Jack had missed him for years, he was looking forward to meeting new people, enjoying the student life and hopefully finding a hot man in the process. And as much as he didn't understand it, he couldn't help but feel like he was going to meet someone in a queue of all things. A very special queue. Nick Locke seriously had no idea why in the world he had decided to come to the university library to queue up and sign a book of condolence for a monarch that he wasn't even that interested in. The part of the university library where the book was located was a part that was normally off limits for students, with its high floor-to-ceiling windows, massive temperature-controlled cabinets filled with ancient books and documents, and there was even an old coffee machine tucked away in one corner. Nick was currently standing at the start of a very long line of university students that snaked around the massive library room, with aromas of musty old books, flowery and earthy perfumes filling the air. There were 3 female students in front of him wearing red, white and blue, the colors of the Union Jack, and they were talking about what the new king was going to be like, and what it meant for the monarchy, and even what it meant for the Commonwealth that still had the British monarch as their head of state. Nick wasn't really too interested in all that, but it was great to see that some people were really excited, and thankfully the line was moving very quickly. There might have been another 100 or so students in front of Nick, but he didn't mind. It was an early Thursday morning, and he didn't have any lectures or anything, and it wasn't even like he had much of a routine at the moment, because this was the first proper week at university. There was meant to be something about the different social clubs you could join later on, but Nick wasn't too sure what he wanted. Well, that wasn't exactly true, as Nick seriously wanted to know about the gay scene at university and in Canterbury. It wasn't that he was looking for clubbing, sex or anything like that, it was just more than he wanted to be around other gay people. Nick had always loved being gay despite being closeted until a few years ago, and even though his parents and entire family had been amazingly supportive, they had still lived in a small village, so he was technically the only gay in the village, and that was hard. The wonderful smell of chai latte, sweet iced coffees, and delicious buttery Danish pastries filled the air as more and more students joined the line, and that really made Nick happy. Especially when the taste of rich fruity Chelsea buns formed on his tongue. Nick absolutely loved their fruity, sweet buttery flavor. He was definitely going to go to a bakery later on and get one. As the line moved a lot more and the 3 women dressed in red, white and blue got more excited, Nick thought he heard a very familiar voice. It was a husky, sexy voice that sounded so manly and attractive. Nick never knew that he was attracted to voices before, but it sounded so familiar. Nick turned around and his body just froze as he saw a ghost from his past. As Nick stared at a very sexy man with cute curly brown hair, skinny jeans that highlighted how fit he was, and a bright white hoodie that looked to be covering washboard abs, Nick was shocked that he was looking at a fully grown-up Jack Willmore. Jack looked so amazing with his face being all lines and angles now, and wow, he really did look so wonderful. Nick just couldn't believe that he was looking at the boy that he had fallen in love with so many years ago, tried to date in secret, and ultimately shattered his little heart, all because how do you tell someone you love them if you couldn't even hold their hand in public? Nick was drawn to talk to Jack a lot more than he ever wanted to admit. The delightful smells of bitter coffee, chai lattes, and the sweetest chocolate Jack had ever smelt filled the air, as he joined the massively long snaking queue in the university library for people to sign the Book of Condolence for the late Queen. Jack was just surprised more than anything at the sheer amount of students queuing up. There were so many different types of students in all their different heights, sizes and countries of origin. Jack had suspected it might only be British, Canadian, and a handful of other countries, but he was impressed. He was even surprised that a group of 3 young female students were standing tens of people in front of him, wearing the red, white and blue of the Union Jack, a symbol that Jack had mixed feelings about these days given how abusive England was towards Scotland and the other nations making up the UK. "This hot chocolate is amazing," Hannah said. Jack just smiled because she had been acting like a kid in a candy store ever since they had left her apartment building. Jack really liked how into the royals Hannah was, and she had been telling him all sorts of things about the royal family on the way over here. But Jack had a feeling that sooner or later he was going to have to run away from Hannah, because as much as he loved her, he didn't really want to listen to royal tales all day. "Jackie," a man said a few meters in front of him. Jack's stomach tightened instantly, as his stomach recognized the voice way before his brain. He flat out couldn't believe that the love of his life, his childhood sweetheart, and the only man that ever made him feel special was here. Jack instantly looked in the direction of the voice, and a lump formed in his throat, and he grabbed onto Hannah for support as he stared at the beautiful, sexy Nick. Even now, after all these years, Nick was still stunning and beautiful like he had been 5 or 6 years ago back in secondary school, before he had broken his heart and fled to live in some rural village in the middle of nowhere. Jack just focused on Nick's thick black hair that still looked just so tempting for Jack to run his thin fingers through, as the day they had met, kissed and told each other everything about each other. That was an amazing day, and even Nick's strong jawline, manly looks and insanely seductive grin hadn't been dulled by time. "You two know each other?" Hannah asked. Jack could only nod as beautiful Nick walked towards him and Hannah, and Jack truly had no idea what to do. Their breakup hadn't even been that ready. One day Nick had been his hot boyfriend when he had been 15 years old. They had been amazing, in love and as head over heels for each other as 15-year-olds closeted boys can be. Then he was gone the next. Jack had no idea what happened to Nick. Nick never called, texted or followed Jack on social media, and as much as Jack wanted to admit that, it didn't bother him too much. Just seeing Nick again brought back so many feelings, some good, some bad. "Yeah," Nick said. "Me and Jack." "You left me," Jack said coldly. He wanted to say more, but he wasn't sure if his voice could hold it together. He found himself leaning more and more on Hannah for support, as his knees went wobbly, and he didn't know how much longer he could face this amazingly hot, sexy man. Because as much as Jack was annoyed by what Nick had done to him and put him through, he just knew deep down that there was an explanation. Jack had come up with a few theories over the years, like Nick's parents had found out about their relationship and moved him to that rural village so they couldn't see each other. Nick might have wanted to save Jack from something, but maybe, and this was the hardest to take, but Nick didn't like him anyway. Yet as Jack looked at Nick and was instantly drawn into that seductive grin, he realized that the last theory was completely wrong, because he was looking at the amazing smile and wonderful dark eyes of a man that was honestly attracted to him. And Jack couldn't deny that he was feeling that exact same way, despite all the years they had been apart. Nick was extremely grateful to Hannah, who Nick just knew was an amazing person, when she suggested that Nick and Jack go into the university library's cafe and grab a coffee together. He wasn't really much of a coffee drinker, but if it was the difference between seeing and not seeing beautiful Jack again, then he was really sure he could force down a cup or 2 or 3. Anything to let him spend more time with the wonderful boy he had had to abandon all those years ago. Nick sat in a very comfortable blue fabric chair next to a tall floor-to-ceiling window that the university just seemed to love for some reason. It was rather nice because there was plenty of great light coming in despite it being a cloudy day, not exactly a shocker for southern England, and there weren't a lot of students walking outside on the immense green field. But what Nick was really interested in was the very cute boy sitting opposite him on the largish plastic round table, as Jack wrapped his hands around his piping hot latte, and he really did look as cute as he had all those years ago. "I didn't mean or know I was going to leave you all those years ago," Nick said, trying to pick his words very carefully. "My mum and dad had said about moving for years, and when they started talking about it more often, we had just started dating." Nick felt his smile go ear to ear as he said that, and he was pleased to see Jack smiling too. "I was too focused on you, feeling myself for the first time and just wanting to be with you. I didn't focus on what my parents were saying even when they were packing up boxes of things," Nick said. And Nick had to admit that there were plenty of signs he had missed about the incoming move. Like packing up of boxes, his parents getting new jobs even though they seriously loved their old ones, and there were plenty of hushed conversations. "Did your parents know about us?" Jack asked, smiling. But Nick could tell it was a worried smile. Jack was a wonderful master of those smiles when they were dating. Jack was basically out and proud when they had been together, and all Jack had really cared about was protecting closeted Nick. Nick really respected and admired his stunning boyfriend for that. "I found out later they did," Nick said, "but it was one of the reasons they delayed the move by 2 months. In the end, my parents just had to move because—" Nick smiled as Jack leant forward. "Because the house we were living in back then was killing my mum. She's always suffered from chronic illness, but the dampness of where we lived in all the houses wasn't agreeing with her." Nick just weakly smiled when he saw Jack want to place his hand on his. It was Jack's kindness and amazingness that had attracted him to him in the first place. It was great that Jack hadn't lost that spark. "Then I got home one day and, well, my dad threw me and my mum in a car and rushed us to our new home. Mum started new treatment with better doctors the next day and she's okay now," Nick said. Even as he said the words and finished explaining what had happened, he actually felt like a complete failure as a son. He should have seen the signs, tried to care for her better, and tried to support her more in the days and weeks after the move, because she did almost die. Jack reached across the table and took Nick's hands in his, and Nick shivered in delight at the warmth, affection, and attraction in Jack's touch. He had seriously missed that feeling. "I know you, Nick," Jack said. "You're worrying again, aren't you?" Nick just laughed lightly. It was so annoying that Jack still remembered how he acted, thought and behaved even now. "Nothing was your fault. If anything, you should be annoyed at me for taking up so much of your time," Jack said. Now Nick laughed for a different reason. For two students starting university, Nick couldn't believe how stupid they both were when it came to love, each other, and their own feelings. "We really did miss each other, didn't we?" Nick asked. Then he noticed how Jack's face frowned slightly and turned paler, and like Nick had said something too soon. Maybe he had. Maybe Nick had said something to scare off beautiful Jack again, so soon after they had found each other again. Nick forced himself to take a deep breath of the wonderful coffee-scented air around him. He needed to think about this logically, and try to place himself in Jack's shoes. Jack hadn't seen him for years. Nick had never told Jack what had happened, and on the first possible moment they had for talking after all these years, Nick had basically told him that his mother had almost died. That would be a lot to process for anyone. Hell, he had been for him. "I'm sorry, that was probably too fast," Nick said. "I was just glad to see you, and you look beautiful." Nick loved seeing Jack smile again, but he really didn't want to say anything else to Jack that would confuse him or make him panic about Nick's family. Nick had done enough, and explained why he had effectively abandoned Jack all those years ago. His job was done. So Nick stood up, grabbed his coffee, and kissed Jack on the head. He loved the feeling of Jack's smooth skin, and it really did remind him of old amazing times. Then Nick started to walk away when Jack grabbed his hand so hard that some of Nick's coffee spilt on his shirt. "What are you doing today?" Jack asked rather quick, and Nick could have sworn there was an edge of desperation to his voice. Nick just smiled. "Whatever you want me to do." Jack just smiled and pulled him closer for another kiss. Jack was completely amazed how today had gone, since he had met the love of his life again at 9 o'clock in the morning. They had spent all morning in the library cafe talking, laughing and catching up about themselves, and Jack couldn't believe how wonderful it was to laugh as much as Nick made him again. He had really missed that. Then Jack and Nick had gone down into Canterbury city centre to have lunch, walk about the shops without buying anything of course, and Jack was surprised to realize just how natural and right it felt to have gorgeous Nick by his side. There was never an awkward moment between them, and it honestly felt like they had been boyfriends for years, maybe even forever. Jack had loved it even more when Hannah had joined them for dinner, and Jack was laughing so much because of Hannah and Nick's constant bantering that his jaw still hurt even now, and Jack and Nick had even shared a Sunday dessert together, and that simple thing meant the entire world to Jack. It really had been magical. Now at 9 o'clock at night, Jack was impressed by the silence of the university library, with only distant talking and tapping of computer keys for comfort, as him and beautiful Nick stood in the chamber where the Book of Condolence for the late Queen was contained. There weren't any more students here queuing up. There was no longer the great aromas of chai lattes, coffee and perfumes from other students. It was just Jack, the love of his life, and the strange death that had ultimately brought them together again. Because the weirdest thing about all of this was, Jack honestly didn't know if he would have seen Nick again, if the Queen hadn't have died, and the university had arranged for a Book of Condolence so students could write messages about the Queen once more. They both had different courses, different friends, and slightly different lives. So maybe this condolence book was actually a good thing. So Jack wrapped his thin fingers around Nick's amazingly warm and caring hand. Then they both went over to the book that was standing on a tall table with pens for students to write with. Jack was impressed that it was a coffee table-sized book with plenty of endearing, supportive, and almost heartbreaking messages of love for the Queen. Jack was amazed and really honored to be British at that moment, because they really did love the amazing monarch that had loved them too. Jack picked up a cold pen and wrote a very simple message, but a message that was true, and very appropriate for the love story this moment had started, and hopefully it would never end again. Thanks for bringing us together again. Nick slowly turned Jack again and kissed him on the lips, the first time in hours, and Jack had missed the feeling of Nick's soft, smooth lips against him. And he instantly realized that no matter what happened today, tomorrow, or even a month from now, their love would probably make it, and that really excited him for the future. And it was strange how it all happened because of a monarch's death, and the need to share their condolences. A very strange but magical meet cue for the history books for sure.
Welcome back everyone, it's me again, Connor Whiteley. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's story, because I flat out love writing, creating stories and sharing them with you. If you really enjoyed today's story, then please remember to like, comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content, and the engagement really helps the Whiteleyverse with the YouTube algorithms. And if you want to buy this short story or any of my other fiction, then they're available from all major ebook retailers, and you can get them from your local library if you requested, and you can order the paperback copies from Amazon, your local bookstore or local library if you request it. Lastly, if you want to support the channel on a one-off basis, then you can now buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. Also, if you know anyone who would enjoy today's story, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the channel. So, thanks for watching the Whiteleyverse, and I'll see you again soon. Have a great day, everyone.